offer a more formal welcome. Just a more formal welcome to everybody on behalf of the Institute for Mindfulness to this learning forum, which I personally am particularly excited about for any number of reasons. Before we get into that, just a few short pieces of admin. The first is, I think Lynn is going to drop her contact details into the chat group. These learning forums are free for IMISA professional members and the current group of students doing the Stellenbosch training. For everybody else, there's a small fee for participating in the learning forum. If you could contact Lynn and she can invoice you for that, we will be grateful. And then there's there's a flyer for Trish's new book, which Lynn will pop the PDF into the chat as well. And there's a QR code which you can scan, as far as I understand, Trish, if you'd like to purchase the book. So that information
at the moment, there isn't an outlet in South Africa, which is completely rubbish. The book depository have stopped delivering to South Africa, so we'll have to think of a way of. I'll be in touch about that. We'll think of a way of.
Great, and that'd be really, yeah. We'll make contact and then see how we can distribute it locally. And is it on Kindle yet? Do you know?
No, not yet.
Okay, so we'll remain in touch with everybody around the availability of the book on Kindle and in hard and soft copy.
Yeah, not hard copy, just soft.
Right, just in thanks for right. So we'll have all the different formats available, but better than the formats is the formless Trish Bartley. Trish, is wonderful to see you and to welcome you back into our community. Trish has got a long-standing love affair with South Africa for decades, actually, and has been deeply involved in community-based work in KwaZulu-Natal in particular. She's written books around the subject. Many of you will know her as being the author of MBCT for Cancer, based on her own lived experience with incredible depth and wisdom. I know some of our students have come and done the training with you, Trish, and made a big impact. You've taught on retreats and also left an indelible impression on many of the students who were on that retreat. I know that because I'm interpreting focus group into interview data in which that retreat featured prominently. So it's wonderful to have you here, and just to let everybody know that this is the official launch of her new book, which is an incredible offering to our community, that this is the first launch of your book, Teaching Mindfulness-Based Groups, the Inside Out Model, which Trish has co-authored with Gemma Griffith and has published a peer-reviewed article 2.5 years ago. And speaking to I think one of the most important subjects in the field of mindfulness-based approaches, which is working in groups, and something which I'm sure you'll speak to, Trish, has been underdeveloped or under-engaged with in our field, and as no doubt will be part of our reflective conversation this evening. We'll begin to look at the importance, the centrality of the group process and the group dynamic and the group frame for effective holding and teaching of this ineffable practice. So welcome, Trish. And Trish will be our main, I don't know quite, a panelist, conversationalist, conversant. I don't quite know what the right word is. Just wonderful guest and friend and mentor of our community. Trish this evening will be joined by Linda, who you all know, most of you know really well, as our senior teacher in our community, a trainer, a therapist, hypnotherapist, and yoga teacher. And Linda, we really appreciate your presence, given you've just come out of a difficult week with the dreaded lurgy, and for holding the conversation with Trish, along with Thobi Zulu, who is where are you, Thobi? Oh, there you are, sitting in a little box next to Linda. And Thobi is a student and practitioner of mindfulness and a teacher of mindfulness-based interventions. She's a graduate of our 2-year training and is also a director for the Institute for Mindfulness, and has been involved recently with doing some extraordinary work with engaging past and current students around their experience of the training, and putting out some pretty special videos which are available on our website. So I'm going to hand over to Linda and Thobi, who are going to be holding the panel and holding the conversation with Trish for this evening, and I will sit back, enjoy, and receive what you have to offer. Thank you all and welcome.
Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, a big thank you, Simon, for that. And I'm so grateful to be with Trish and Thobi. It's such a treat, even coming out of this this kind of lurgy week, just to be in the presence of these two very special women. So yeah, and of course in the presence of everybody here, really, really special.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. And I have a hope, a big hope, that we'll be able to have a meaningful conversation, all of us together, on this very important subject. So yeah, welcome. And thank you, Trish, as well.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So maybe I'll start off. Shall I do that, Linda and Thobi? Shall I just start off by sharing some basic outlines, and then maybe that will get us going in terms of conversations and you know, questions, and just see where that takes us. Yeah,
I just wanted to say that we kind of met in the week a week ago, and you know, we had a wonderful conversation, and we just thought we'd be spontaneous with today and see where the conversation went, and just follow the tracks. And of course we'll have time for questions as well, so time for engagement as well.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Yeah, so maybe speaking to a little bit of what Simon alluded to, but also just to say how special it is for me to have a South African book launch, as Simon said first, because South Africa means a huge amount to me. People I've worked with, people in the villages up in Limpopo, I worked there for a year. People in KwaZulu-Natal, I was very involved with an NGO there. And you guys, IMISA, very, very much. So, you know, you're very close to my heart. And so to find that we could actually do this little event, I've been saying to people, I'm going to South Africa tonight to launch my book. And they're saying, oh, wow, that's good. That's quite a way. Yeah, so it's very special for me, very, very special for me. So it's a real treat. So I want to share with you a little bit about my passion for groups, because I think more than anything, that's going to be of use to you. And really a kind of reflection that despite some really important interventions like mindfulness, we've actually become tremendously individualistic. Now, I'm talking as a European, and it may be that as Africans, you're not going to feel quite the same way. So forgive me if I don't quite speak the language that's going to resonate in South Africa. I haven't been with you long enough, recently enough to kind of attune to what's really relevant for you. But certainly in the north of the world, the world is speeding up rapidly. You know, the sound bites, the attentional kind of focus is getting shorter and shorter. You know, the drama scenes are getting shorter and shorter on the television, you know. I think it's quite concerning. And with that, this whole kind of individualistic culture, this me and mine, is such a focus. And I imagine it must be pretty similar with you as well. I don't imagine it's that different. So I've always been interested, partly because my background's in community work. I've always been interested in community. I've always been interested in kind of the other and the way that we connect. And I guess if I was to have a gravestone, a tombstone, wanting to connect would be on my tombstone. That's kind of my, you know, my kind of core wish, actually. So we started thinking, Gemma and I started thinking about this, and actually I work for the Mindfulness Network at Bangor University, used to be called the Centre for Mindfulness Research and Practice, but we've sort of gone in two slightly different directions, but very much connected. And so we've been working around group for quite a bit, really. And so this book has been waiting to be written. And the first thing that happened, as Simon alluded, is we wrote a paper called the Inside Out Group Model, which some of you may have come across, that Gemma first authored. And that went into the Mindfulness Journal back in 19, I think, and was very well received, actually. And I think really, apart from the odd chapter around teaching groups, there's been almost nothing written about groups. There's been the odd research study, but really very, very little, although that's beginning to creep up. And if you manage to get hold of a copy of this book that's just come out that we're talking about today, you will see some really great research that Gemma has drawn out, and a lovely chapter on pedagogy, which I think is the best of her chapters. I think it's really superb, about almost like the story of how group became more important in the training of mindfulness-based teachers. So we come with a background really of this kind of individualistic perspective that we have. And I'm afraid it is true in mindfulness as well, that a lot of people come on our courses because they want to improve themselves, or because they're concerned about their own well-being. None of that is wrong or bad. And it was probably our motivation when we first got involved as well. But I think increasingly, because of the emergencies in the world, the climate emergencies, the social justice emergencies, for heaven's sake, the food security emergencies, which you in Africa have known about for a long time, but the North are only just beginning to wake up to, thanks to Ukrainian war, then actually there are these emergencies that are forcing us, actually, thank goodness, to look beyond our own individualistic larders, if you like, and particular orientations, and actually look to our communities. I'm very lucky. I live in an eco estate, and the community is extraordinarily diverse. I have never lived, apart from when I lived in Limpopo, never lived anywhere so diverse. Actually, it's more diverse than Limpopo, because Limpopo was the village was African and white. I mean, there were those two. Here we have Russians and Ukrainians living next door to each other. We have Spanish and French. We have Africans. We have Middle Easterns. It's great. It's really, really lovely. So to come back to the book, what we did with the and Thobi and Linda, do shut me up if I'm talking too much, but I'll just maybe give a bit of an overview. Is that okay? Come back to the book, and I just want to share the model with you, which some of you may know, may have come across before, and it's ever such a simple model, which I think is helpful, because I think now can you see that? Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So I don't know about you, but I think if you're going to have a model, let's make it nice and easy. Let's make it easy to remember. So basically, it's a circle with a triangle in the middle. The circle is the group. The triangle in the middle is the teacher's inside-out embodying, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then you've got these three, what we're calling, we're sort of calling them competencies, but that's a little bit dry, I think. But these three kind of almost like qualities of attention or qualities of teaching. One is reading, which I'll define for you in a minute. One is holding, and one is befriending. So it's a very, very simple model. And the whole idea is that as teachers, we can kind of take this model into our teaching, and we can sort of at different moments be just perhaps when the groups are in small group process, we can sort of be thinking, how's that triangle in the middle going? What's going on in the group at the moment in terms of reading? Where's the group up to? What does it need? Does it need a bit more holding from me, or a bit less? Could I actually pull back a little bit and give them a little bit more space? And is there enough befriending? Is there enough warmth and appreciation and, those qualities of kindness? Is that coming through? So I'm hoping that you can just you could just replicate that model very easily with the circle and the triangle, and those three sort of qualities stroke competencies. I don't like competencies, it's a bit dry, isn't it? So the inside out embodying, I think it's really helpful to notice that the embodying is no longer a noun. So it's not embodiment, it's embodying, which I think is really helpful. I think it's a really important development. So embodying suggests that it's a quality, it's a process, it's in process, it's a verb. It's something that we're practicing, we're cultivating. It's not like a sort of state. Okay, this is embodiment. This is what embodiment looks like. Because actually, it's like all the other qualities involved with mindfulness. It comes and goes, doesn't it? And embodying involves, of course, the body. So like, I'm a bit nervous talking to you, not massively because I've connected with you now, but, beforehand, I was really aware of my feet on the floor. I haven't got any shoes on. So I've got my feet against a kind of footrest, which has got sort of blobby bits on it, which I like because I can really feel that contact, it's very grounding. So I think that's one of the aspects, one of the threads of embodying that's really important. But there are other threads around, what are we embodying? Are we embodying, I don't know, are we embodying coolness? Are we embodying a sort of intellectual didactic type teaching? Are we embodying, I don't know, doubt and, confusion? I'm sure often as teachers, we embody confusion, like what's going on here? What are we meant to be doing next? Are we embodying a kind of, an intention? I mean, I loved what Simon said earlier. Let's just have an intentionality to be present here, to really bring our beings into this space. Are we embodying an intention just to do the best we can, allowing for the fact that will be not good enough sometimes, but it'll be okay at others. So embodying, I think, is important. It's body, it's values, it's also insights and learning. So it's kind of what's important in mindfulness that we're hoping that our participants begin to have an appreciation for. We push away what we don't want. We hang on to what we do want. The mind wanders a lot. We move into automatic pilot and into reactivity. And so all those things that we know well, those insights and learning that we, as best we can, we're embodying as another suffering being, actually. So that's the triangle that we're holding. I mean, it's massive. I've talked about it for like 5 minutes, but it's absolutely huge, isn't it? I mean, it's huge. But it's, it's something that we can keep coming back to, actually, which is great. And then we have reading, holding, and befriending. But before we get into that, let's just go to the circle. And Linda, do chip in if I'm whittering on too much. But just going on, is it all right? Yeah, just going to the circle. And the circle is all about the group. So sometimes the group is on the screen, so it's not so much circular, it's more kind of square or rectangular. But we have to, as teachers, really launch that circle, launch that group. It's not going to become a group without some important interventions on our part. And I'm sure I'm sure many of you have worked with groups, probably lots and lots of your life and work. I'm sure that many of you are very skilled with groups. So all that you know with groups can be applied and can be translated into your mindfulness teaching, of course. I mean, for me, it's a lot about safety and inclusivity. So it's a lot about what do we do to help the group feel and be as safe as possible. And that's very much about boundaries. It's about ground rules. It's about orientation. It's about making sure that people have respect for each other and a lot of other stuff that you would know very, very well, but needs thinking about. How can I help this group to be safe? Yeah. And then it's also about inclusivity. So it's about having a possibility of belonging here, of feeling that it's okay to be here, that I might not be the same as everybody else, but actually there is a space for me here that I can sit in and feel as best as possible, feel okay in. And that will take time. And of course, inclusivity brings us into diversity. It brings us into areas it brings us into areas of race, of difference, of kind of diversity that's visible, which on the whole race mostly is. We get a bit stuck on this because Wales and England don't always get on terribly well, but they look pretty similar, So, so it's a bit tricky to talk about Britishness, because the Scots at the moment are so pissed off with London, so, and yet, unless they were playing bagpipes or something, they look pretty similar, So we've got diversity that's very visible, and we've got diversity that's invisible. And we don't often think about that. We don't think about the diversity that we can't spot immediately, So that's a whole huge area of how can we teach in a way that's inclusive in our groups. And it's really important, and there aren't any kind of straightforward answers, but there's lots of things to think about how do we welcome people at the door as they walk into the room, because in that moment, we know the moment we meet somebody, we get an impression of them. We get an impression of sort of genuineness or trying a bit hard, or when I'm nervous, I talk a bit faster. You probably noticed, and my voice goes a bit higher, you kind of, you don't consciously pick that up, but there is some feel of it. And then there was something else I wanted to mention apart from welcoming. Yeah, the space that people walk into, the space that we teach in, the space of the group is not neutral. I think that's incredibly, if you walk away with one thing, I think that's the thing to walk away with tonight. We don't teach in neutral spaces. All our pictures, look at all the books behind, what does that say about me? I mean, I could blur it out, but actually, it's my office and there are all the books, but what is it? I mean, Simon's got wonderful sort of looks like Aboriginal painting behind that. What does that say about him? We have our own, Sarah's got a cat on her lap, that's so lovely. But, we have an awful lot that says a lot about us. And that for some people will be very engaging. I mean, Thobi might see my books and think, oh, great, she's a reader like me. Or she might, I don't know, Thobi, I'm just using you as a guinea pig.
Or she might feel intimidated, like, oh my goodness, this woman has clearly more intelligence than I do. And yeah. I think already when you're walking into, you're like, oh, okay. But yes, I hear what you're saying completely.
Yeah. And if I was to walk into the space where you teach, which actually I would dearly love to, because I love jazz, and I understand you teach in a jazz setting,
Definitely not neutral.
I'm
neutral at all.
Not at all. But it's just to be aware that some people would walk into our spaces and they'd feel completely comfortable. I'm middle class, I'm white. I'm straight, I've got kids, I've got grandkids. That's part of my identity. I've written some books. Do you know what I mean? We've all got our own identities, and we can't change that. We have to be who we are, but we have to have awareness of, is that inclusive to some people? Is that less inclusive to others? And how can we actually look at the margins and the mainstream of our groups, and in such a way that actually the margins almost become the mainstream? So the margins are the one who are those that almost kind of set the norms of the group, rather than the mainstream, which certainly in the UK would be white. I mean, you look at the UK mindfulness teachers, they're predominantly white. You in South Africa have done such a good job. I know it's not enough yet, but it's the beginnings of a really fantastic job of actually including your African sisters and brothers as trainee teachers. I mean, it's just fabulous. It takes years and years to do. So that's this business of launching the group, and with this idea of safety and inclusivity. And I think those two are tremendously important. And then just briefly reading, which remember we've got 3 little Philips in the model. We've got Phillips rather than Phillips. Sorry, I don't know if there isn't a Philip in the group. Phillips. So we've got reading, and that's really like, where's this group up to? You know, has it launched yet? You know, do people feel they belong? Or is it beginning to sort of move, you know, be a bit stormy? You know, kind of, and that's great. It needs to storm. I'm not going to go into that tonight, but you know, where is the group up to? What does it need from me as the teacher, or from you guys as teacher or trainer? Yeah. That's quite important. And body language, of course, is huge, absolutely huge. You know, just looking at the body language of the group, the body language of individuals in the group, but also you may find there's particular body language on one side of the group. You know, people on the right aren't talking very much. Well, why is that? You know, everybody on the left seems quite comfortable. People on the right are a bit stuck. They're a bit, you know, and how can we bring people in without kind of making them feel, oh my God, Trish is going for me, you know, or she's being very direct or whatever. Okay. So that's reading. There's a lot more to that. And then there's holding, which is a little bit like, you know, that changes as the group develops. So in the early days, the group probably needs quite a lot of holding, quite a lot of structure, quite a lot of this is how we're going to do this, you know, lots of choice, but lots of sort of, you know, holding the time boundaries, you know, being clear about what we're doing, how we're doing it. And then as the course goes on, or as the group meets a bit more often, you know, we can sort of loosen up a bit, and we can sort of pass things over much more to the group to explore, and we just keep the show on the road as best we can. Yeah. And then you've got befriending at the bottom, which of course is a quality of mindfulness anyway, but that's something that we can really bring through in quite a sort of cogent way, I think. So I think that's absolutely plenty from me, apart from the value stuff, which I hope might come through in our discussion. So over to Thobi and Linda. How did that land with you?
For me, that was great. I've had a bit of, I have some, you know, pieces of the book that I got to read through, and it really did blow my mind. And as I was reading through it, I was trying to think, can we do this here? Can we do this here? You speak about all the different types of mindfulness action groups. So it goes from, you know, the mindfulness is just you're in the beginning, the healing is about you. And then it sort of then goes out into the world. You all of a sudden find an intention or a purpose or a willingness to do something, you know, for humanity. And I was very interested to see how that would work here in South Africa. And you also mentioned that, you know, in the UK, there's groups, most of the teachers there are white in their majority. I think you're right, but IMISA is definitely trying to change that here, but the statistics, I think, would still see that as well here. And there's a lot of things that sort of inhibit the growth of the Black people coming into IMISA, but that's a different, I'm not into IMISA, but into mindfulness and training, but that's a different conversation altogether. I'm also interested in the reading. I as the teacher am reading my students. Did I understand that correctly? So that would require a lot of for lack of a better word, sensitivity on my part as the teacher. Like, I would have to be very sensitive to be able to read the group. Or do you think that's something that just comes with practice as a teacher as you continue to do groups?
I think you're doing it already, Thobi. And I think that what all that's needed is for you to have an awareness of actually adding a question in here, not so much, you know, how is Mike doing? How is Catherine doing? How is Kate doing in this session? But like, how is the group doing as well? So it's almost like we're bringing another entity into the room. and were instead of just sort of concentrating on her and him and them and that one there, we're actually looking at the group as a whole, and actually saying to ourselves, well, how is the group doing? How does it feel? You know, are they engaged? Are they bored? Is this group, you know, quite young? Is this group beginning to I have a nice exercise which you might play with, Thobi, in your teaching, which you might enjoy, and that's, if this group was an animal, what would it be? And I love this, and some of you might want to play with this sort of. So Sarah's got two cats on her lap, which is so nice. So you know, if this group was an animal, it might be a sleepy cat. It might be, you know, a little bit sleepy, a little bit, you know, a little bit exhausted, maybe a little bit wanting to lie in the sun and enjoy the heat, you know. Or maybe this group is more like is it a lemur? You know, those little creatures that live in the ground, and then they hop up, they like look around, and then they see something, and then they go back in again. And the kind of early group is sort of quite scared, quite nervous, you know, and they kind of put their hand up, and then you know, am I going to say something or not? So I think it's quite nice, you know, and as the group develops and matures, groups tend to get more grounded. And they often turn into big cats. For me, anyway. I mean, groups that are really going some, for me, are often like big cats, you know, like tigers or yeah, very beautiful big animals that go fast, but also have a capacity to be very relaxed, but have a tremendous potential. So you might play with that. I think it's probably easier than you think it might be. Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and Trish, I just want to thank you for, you know, it's such a beautiful model and summary, and I kind of feel like it's the kind of model we'd need to carry around and have next to us, just to kind of keep us in tune. And I guess as I was reading the book, you know, this, especially looking at the research that so many teachers have not recognized the significance, the importance of the group process itself. So I think what you're adding is so important for us. And I was kind of wondering, you know, like, what's the impact of the fact that we have not focused on this? You know, John talks about groups, you know, about, you know, the practice and relationality. So it's not that it's not there, the importance of groups in terms of, we understand mindfulness to be relationality, but what you've really added is a way for us to really to hold the group process in a lot more awareness, in a lot more presence. So what you're speaking to Thobi around, you know, starting to recognize, am I reading the group? You know, it just that, I think, is already so useful.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, Linda, because it's absolutely true. The research showed, it was fascinating. The research showed that teachers didn't really take the group much into account. But when you ask the participants of those teachers, the group was absolutely central. So interesting. Which actually, if you think about it, you think of, you know, whenever we're in groups, groups are very important to our experience of whatever's going on, you know. Yeah, I tell a story in the group, in the book, not in the group, of going to a, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Thobi and Linda, when we were talking about this, but I went to this bizarre training some time ago. Well, ages and ages ago, tens of years ago. And I remember even now, the guy who was running the training was very, very skillful. And I can remember some of the things that he got across. It wasn't mindfulness, but it was about personal development. And it was about different perspectives around the way we as people develop. It was very, very interesting. But it was also interesting, the fact that anything that I said, he completely blanked. He just never, ever acknowledged anything that I said. So everything that anybody else said, it was quite a small group, it was probably about 8 or so people, if that. Everything that everybody else said went up on the flip chart, quite carefully, you know, and he would say, yeah, that's interesting. And then I would say something, and it just never reached the flip chart. And it was very interesting, because to begin with, I was like, oh, what's wrong with me? And like, what's his number? It was very interesting. And yet there was a way that the group held me, because in quite a short time, I would say something, because I carried on contributing because I was very interested in what was being said. And a member of the group would look towards me and smile as if to say, yes, you see, he's done it again. But the group actually held me.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that we remember, and we need to remember, is it's not all up to us. We don't have to think that it's all up to us. It's like, it's a bit of an iffy thing to perhaps parallel, but it's a bit like families, families with loads of kids. The older kids hold the younger kids. It's not all up to the parents. They can't do it all if they've got a whole stack of kids. Do you know what I mean? The parents are important, and they get the show on the road, and they probably buy the food and so on. But actually, it's a unit, and I think that's more and more what we need to be. We need to be appreciating in the groups that we teach and in the groups that we work with. That it's as much about interactions between participants as it is about between the teacher and the participants. And I think that's great. Samora, you've got your hand up. Do you want to say something? No? You're going to come through? Yes, you're coming through.
Hi,
Great.
Trish.
Hi, it's lovely to see you.
Good evening, everyone. Actually, I was not putting my thumbs up to raise a point, but I just thought I really agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
In that, group dynamics are sort of unique to that specific group. So
yes,
perhaps you have to. I think somebody mentioned that you gotta read the room, or
yes,
be able to see how can I best support this group or engage with this group. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Samora. You're absolutely right. I agree with you. I think that there are some group development theories that are helpful. So I think that we mentioned those, Gemma mentions those in the book, and I think they're helpful to have those sort of in the bank, if you like. Some of you, I'm sure, will have come across Bruce Tuckman, who wrote a paper back in 1965, which is now, it's probably before many of you were born, for heaven's sake, 1965. I have to say it wasn't before I was born. But a long, long time ago. And, a lot of people have rubbished it, Tuckman's development, group development phases, a lot of people rubbish it, but it's actually pretty helpful. So he had this idea that groups start with forming, which I think is absolutely right. And then they move on to storming, when they kind of muscle it a bit and they kind of challenge the group leader. And then they move to norming, where they kind of figure out the sort of group they're going to be. And then they move to performing. I think the only trouble with his model is that it tends to appear to be rather sort of smooth and circular. And I don't think groups are like that. I think they can perform in their first session. And then you think, oh my goodness, this is going to be a fabulous group. Isn't that great? And they come to their second and third session and they get stuck in storming, or they just fade out, or they're not interested, or whatever, And so I think that's it's a useful tool, but it's not too fixed, really.
I appreciate that you're saying that, Trish, because I do think that you never know what's going to happen next in a group, and you can think it's in one stage and it's actually completely in another stage. One of the things that I like, though, is you use the word launching instead of forming, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yes, I do, actually. I grew up with a younger brother who was always a bit naughty, as younger brothers tend to be, and I had two sisters, but they were a lot older, and we used to go on Sundays. We would hire a rowing boat from the boatyard. I don't think you can do stuff like this anymore. We would go on the river. I don't know, perhaps you can in South Africa, but I don't think you can in the UK. But anyway, we would go on the river, and my mum would have the same old picnic basket. I think she had it till the day she died, and the same kind of tin plates and tin mugs and stuff. And we would have the same rather boring salad, with just half a bit of egg and one rather crumpled lettuce leaf, like the old salad. But my brother would love it because he would stand in the boat and he would deliberately make the boat wobble from side to side. And I would get furious and say, "Oh, Charles, for heaven's sake, sit down, will you?" And you know, my parents would, I don't know what, but Charles would always deliberately rock the boat, deliberately. And I was much more anxious than him. And so I would want him to sit down, you know, and eventually we would sit down. And then probably, I don't know, sometimes it would be Charles, I suppose. Sometimes it was me who's rowing, but we would then row. And we would then row down the river, you know, and the boat would be reasonably steady because there were people kind of balanced in this boat, you know. And I quite like that idea, that business of launching, you know, the teacher has to, the kind of boat leader has to sort of launch the boat into the water, you know, it needs a bit of a shove. I quite like that. And, you know, sort of say, well, where are you going to sit? And we kind of go on the same journey, but we don't actually know what we're going to see each time. So I quite like launching. We thought we'd move away from forming. We thought it would be interesting to do something different. Yeah, yeah.
Just a question from me. When you have a group and half that group sort of likes to shake the boat, I suppose this will speak to the holding. How do you do that?
I don't know. I think sometimes it's quite hard. I think sometimes it's quite hard to hold yourself. You know, I think sometimes, you know, things can get wobbly. And hopefully, you know, the wobble isn't in the teacher. Hopefully the teacher is reasonably well embodied and is able to hold the wobble in the group. But I certainly, I'm sure all of us have times where we wobble too, you know, and it's like, you know, managing that process as best we can. But I think feet on the floor is always a good place to come back to. And I think inviting a pause with the whole group is also helpful. You know, that if something weird is going on, I think it's very helpful just to kind of say, should we just take a pause here? And people don't need to know that actually I haven't a clue what's going on. I don't know what's needed next, you know, but let's just take a pause here. Yeah. And we can sort of gather rather than trying to keep the show on the road and not really knowing which way we need to be going. I think pausing is so helpful. And then just go on, Toby. Yeah.
Sorry, not only just to the group, obviously that pause will help the teacher as well. If she is struggling or he is struggling with their own thoughts of what is going on now, like how can I put this back together again because it's gone off the rails. And I'm just thinking about, like, when you speak of diversity and you have a group of diverse people, surely that would also sort of, you know, especially in our context, I would say, it might cause a little bit of I almost feel like saying this should be like a manual on how to hold the type of groups that would rock the boat, you know, or the teaching might rock the boat, or the diversity within the group might rock the boat.
Well, I think there are two things to that, really. I mean, one is that sometimes rocking the boat of the group is a really good thing. Shaking things up and not just going along with how things always go along, I think can sometimes be a very, very good thing. You know, finding some edginess, you know, finding some edginess and actually acknowledging, you know, this is difficult, this stuff. You know, and not trying to find some easy solution, but just acknowledging, you know, that sometimes things are tough, that sometimes things are painful. You know, I work mostly with people with cancer, you know, so you know, things are edgy. People are coming up against their own mortality, you know, their own uncertain futures. So, you know, we can't keep it all nice so that the boat runs smoothly. It's just not how it works. So I think that's one thing, that the rocking of the boat isn't necessarily a bad thing, although too much rocking at the start, I think, is very tricky. I think we need to get the boat reasonably stable before some of that storming happens. I think that's important. And I had another point and I just completely lost it. Hang about, it'll come back to me. Yeah, there's a lot I could say, and I've lost the point I was going to make with you, so I'm so sorry. I can't remember what I was going to say.
It happens to me all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in my experience, I think that we can be quite scared of diversity. We can be quite scared of intense emotion. And actually, in some ways, we're all diverse. Some people may have different color skin, but actually, even amongst, people who look similar, there's tremendous diversity, tremendous different backgrounds, and we all bring our stuff with us. I've actually got a poem for you, which I think I read to you, didn't I, Thobi? Didn't I read the poem to you? I think I did. Okay, well, I've got a poem for you which speaks to this. So, and you'll have to forgive me if I get hot. We've got a real heat wave going on here, and I've got kids playing outside. So I've shut the windows, so it's getting quite warm.
And it's freezing cold in Joburg.
Is it freezing? Oh, well, of course, we're in the summer and you're in winter, aren't you? So anyway, this is a poem for you. So see what you think about this, because in a way, this speaks to just what you've been talking about. We might call them the fractures of childhood, or maybe worse, maybe much worse. It is as if we have these trailers heavy with life's junk, which we're forced to drag behind. Only until we join with others through the listening and speaking, the heartfelt knowing and connecting, can we stop and release some of that history, upcycling pieces into something better, something kinder. It's a bit like producing an orchestra out of a slag heap, full of the world's rubbish, thoughtlessly cast off by some, transformed, valued, and made quite wonderful by others. Let us pause and see. Let us include and hear, lest we pass through one another like blowing snow.
I love that. Let us
Very beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Trisha, because it makes me, I guess, one of my thoughts around groups and mindfulness-based groups in particular is just like, does the mindfulness-based group provide something more or different in terms of this potentiality that Thobi is talking about and inquiring about, and we're kind of going, is it possible? So I was also wondering about this ingredient of the practice itself and how that makes a group different, and how it makes the running of a group different, and how it makes the potential of the group different.
That's such a great question, isn't it? Such a great question. I don't know if I have the answer. I have some feelings about the answer. So I think one of the things that happens in a group that's very different to, I think I acknowledge that pretty much everybody here will already have a lot of experience with groups. And that will be very helpful to what we bring into mindfulness teaching. But I think mindfulness has this extra ingredient of practice, as you say, Linda, and that enables this practice community that, you think of people we've been on retreat with that we've never spoken to, and yet we have a sense of connection with, because we've sat and practiced with. I've been on a retreat just recently and I really felt that, really quite strongly. So I think that mindfulness adds something to a group and to a community that we don't get in other therapeutic groups or action groups or community groups. And I think that's really, really helpful. I think mindfulness also offers something to the group dimension, the discussions, the small groups, the kind of curriculum exercises, the raisin and the 9 dots and all those sorts of things. I think mindfulness offers something to all of those as well, in that we learn to sit alongside others and hear different perspectives to our own. And I don't know how many times we have a chance to do that in ordinary life, inverted commas. How often we kind of discuss our problems together, we moan about, work environment or, the politics. Endlessly, let's moan about politics. I can get into that with the best of them, you can imagine. But we don't often talk about the way we relate to our thoughts, or, you know, the way we get sucked into wanting or not wanting, or all those things in mindfulness that are really so interesting and so different. And I think in a group, there are a number of things that kind of come out. I think that we hear different perspectives, which I think is incredibly helpful. We learn to disagree with people without falling out with them, without needing to split off from them. So we might not agree with people's ideas, you know, or we might not agree with their experience. So they might feel sleepy in a body scan, I might feel restless. So we've experienced something very different, but actually it's okay. It's just different. It's, you know, and sometimes we might feel sleepy and, you know, Emmanuel looks like a clever bloke, you know, he might be sleepy as well. And I think, oh, good, that's okay, because he looks clever and he's sleepy. Oh no, he doesn't look so clever now. Do you know what I mean? And so we can kind of adjust how we see ourselves alongside the group, which I think it's quite helpful. And I think that offers us perspectives around values as well. Yeah. So is that what you were thinking of?
I think that's useful, and I, you know, because I mean, I guess you're speaking to that shared experience that allows for connection, and the shared experience of practice itself that allows for connection, and I guess some kind of safe exploration around our difference. So I love what you're saying, and then I was also thinking, you know, in a way, this practice gives us the capacity to turn towards the rocky. You know, what you were speaking to, Thobi. It's like, what do we do if things are rocky? But actually, the practice itself gives us that capacity to turn towards rocky. You know, what does rocky feel like? So I think that there's, you know, for me, I really am kind of thinking there's something about a mindfulness-based group that allows for that potentiality for this to move out beyond just the individual, going back to your original point.
Really, really lovely. And I'm aware that Bianca wants to come in, and Michael, but can I just drop in here before we move on, is I think that increasingly we're going to find that mindfulness is being used, and people are coming into mindfulness because they want to do something in the world. This is what Thobi was talking to, wasn't it, Thobi? And what you and I were discussing a little bit, you know, when we were talking last week, is like, at the moment, mindfulness is seen for this individual well-being. Well, maybe we need to expand our horizons a little bit and see that mindfulness programs have actually got something to offer individual and collective well-being, that they have something to offer the climate emergency, that they have something to offer social justice issues, as well as the individual. It's not either or. Yep. Michael, you've got your hand up. Do come in here.
I think Bianca was
first. Sorry, her hand went away, so I got to you. Yeah. Bianca, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks. So I just wanted to say, I think the mindfulness practice opens up the possibility to connect with others on a human to human level. So it's almost surprising how in certain situations the differences of the group dissipate and the similarities come to the fore. And just something simple like focusing on the breath or focusing on parts of the body allows for this connection on just a human to human level.
Lovely.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Bianca. That's lovely. Michael.
Just an interesting point that we were talking about earlier, about when the group dynamic is quite, or maybe it's going through a bit of a storming moment, and how to read that, and as a teacher. But what I wanted to say is that as somebody that's been in the group, you know, not in the teaching role, what I've sort of felt was that the group itself got to know the dynamic quite well, almost potentially better than the teacher did. You know, we're sensing it all the time as the energy shifts, as the dialogue continues. And I was in a group once where the facilitator just put it back to us and just with a simple question. So guys, what do we think is happening here? You know, and the answer was with us, you know, for the teacher to try and understand in that moment what's going on, what's underneath what the surface is obviously very difficult. So my sense is that often the group itself has a good feel for what is happening. And to your point earlier, Trish, that the teacher's not alone. You know, they don't have to do it all on their own. The group has a role as well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to express, I've had that sense myself that we actually, as the group, knew what was the undercurrent and was able to work with it. You know,
definitely.
Yeah.
I worked with a group not all that long ago, very precious to me, a group of people with cancer, and some of them were quite poorly. It was quite a big group, so it was about 12 or 13, which is quite a big group for a clinical group. And we had a follow-up session afterwards, which I turned partially into a focus group, because I was writing the book and I was interested to see what they would say. And what they said is that there was a lot of crying actually in that focus group, and there was a lot of discussion around, there's a lot of love in this room, and it was incredibly poignant actually. It was incredibly poignant. And they spoke about how when somebody made some remark, it really connected for them. And then somebody else would jump in. Yes, I remember that moment. That's when we did that body scan, didn't we? You said this and I said that and somebody else said that. And I just felt so safe in this place. And that was the beginnings for me of what then evolved. And it was very special. I don't think all groups are like that, but it was, I lost the recording, which in some ways is a very good thing. It was very frustrating at the time, but I think it was probably a very good thing, because it would have kind of concretized something that was very fluid and very lovely. But, you know, groups, there can be a lot of love in groups, a lot of love. And there can be a lot of difficulty as well, sometimes, yes. Manuel.
Just to confirm what you just said, 2 weeks ago, I had session 7 of the MBSR. And all I did was let them stand in a circle and just look at each other. And one person just ran out, and after a while came in, and the person is in the 60s, doctorate. He said he never experienced so much love. And this silence, just looking at each other. So just to confirm the power of the group, you know, I've been teaching, I've been giving meditations, nothing happened. Just the group looking at each other for 20 seconds and he's out of it.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is that, you know, I loved the conversation that we had earlier with last week with Thobi, and she was sort of questioning, which I'm doing all the time, as to how can we move from a mindfulness-based group to actually do some good in the world, to actually engage with social justice and racial justice issues and food security and all those other things that are so urgent and so huge. How can we imagine that what we're doing in this little group here might have some impact on that? And I would actually say that it's not a huge step to just gently drop in. And I don't mean that in some kind of oh, what's the word, Linda? Some kind of you know, trying to influence in a way that's inappropriate. What would be the word? Manipulative. I don't mean this in a manipulative way, but just like include in some of our examples of like everyday behaviors or routine activities, or some of the examples of some of the things we're working with in the mindfulness context, of including some of those, you know, how do you relate to watching the news at night? You know, when you see something on the news that really touches you, how can we use our practice to actually support us to relate to that? You know, when we go to the supermarket and I don't know, we realize that things have gone up even more, and we hear, or we perhaps see people who've got really quite thin shopping baskets or something. I don't know, but you know, just to be bringing in some examples of what's going on in our communities. You know, what are the actions that actually help us, that we take in our communities or in our families or out in the world, that are in tune with our values. You know, because I think one of the things that mindfulness-based programs really, really does in a big way is really help us connect with our intentions in the way that we want to be in the world, the way we want to live in the world. You know, and we may never hear the content of that with our participants, but undoubtedly the mindfulness program is, I think, hopefully, is inviting people to connect with some sense of, you know, some sense of, you know, what is my intention? You know, how am I going to spend my days? Yeah.
Well, I think what you're saying, Trish, is so important because, I mean, in a way, it speaks to, I guess, some of the shadow of mindfulness, you know, in terms of, you know, Mac mindfulness, and I guess some of the literature that's out there that's kind of quite critical around mindfulness. And it's, you know, certainly the work that I do in the organizational field, in the work world, you know, it certainly has been criticized as a kind of plaster that just kind of, so it allows for toxic work environments, but they're just like, oh, here, do some breath awareness practice, you'll feel much better. But we're not going to do anything to kind of deal with the context that we're in. So I think what, you know, you raise such an important thing for us to think about as teachers and facilitators, and also in terms of, you know, the evolution of these practices and the evolution of mindfulness-based groups is, you know, do we bring in those kinds of questions? How do we bring in those kinds of questions in terms of mindfulness actually being about something more than just me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Yes, that's so important, isn't it, Linda? I'm so glad that that's coming into our conversation. You know, and I'm really interested, Thobi. I mean, I think I'm right in thinking that you know you would be working in an African community with other African women, probably mostly. Is that right?
So when we chatted last week, we spoke about I made an example of two different groups that I had.
Yeah.
And the one group was all Black females that live in Vosloorus. And obviously we had it at the jazz club, and it's obviously not a neutral environment or anything like that, but the way that they receive the teaching at the beginning was very difficult because of their own background and their own beliefs. You know, they would look at mindfulness and meditation and all of that as something so foreign to them. And so sort of like getting through that brick wall seems to be the first hurdle.
Yeah.
And then I had another group, same age group as me, similar backgrounds as me, also Black women, professionals in their own right. And they just, you know, they just got it. And it went wonderful. The difference between those two was what when we were chatting last week, was what I was trying to get at, that the first group I spoke about, there's a wall first that I need to break down before I can even actually start.
Sure. And I think the group is, I mean, I haven't got any answers to that, but the group will be incredibly important in that, because certainly there was a shared resistance and a shared doubt and a shared cultural a sort of separation from something like mindfulness, which after all is, you know, was first originated with a white American guy, which is a long way away from a South African group of Black women. I mean, a long way away.
It goes even further than that, because when they see you, you know, in your posture, and you're teaching them how to pay attention to their breaths. Now they are meditating. Now it's even further. I mean, it's like they're thinking now we're in India and we're doing funny things.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
So you have to go through that first and break that down.
Well, I would say, Thobi, don't break it down, but use the group to just soften into it, and in such a way that really normalizes it. So maybe not sit like an Indian cross-legged on the floor, but maybe sit in a chair and just keep your eyes open and have your feet on the floor and just go and look at a color, and, you know, just do things that are very tiny and very African. You know, which I'm sure is exactly what you did. Yeah.
I had them sit on chairs because I knew that the sitting in a posture would be a bit of an issue. But
Sure.
we did do a body scan.
Yeah.
And I think some of them were a little uncomfortable about lying on the floor. Now, I didn't do a body scan sitting on the chair.
Sure.
I went with the one where you're lying on the floor. And it did, yeah, came across a few. But
Yeah.
eventually, I think we got there, but not to where I would have liked for the
Sure.
group myself.
Sure. So Catherine, come in because it would be lovely to hear about your experience. You've gone. Where's she gone? I've lost her. Catherine, where are you? Oh, there you are. Catherine, take your mute off and speak to us.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, good. I'm so glad to be in dialogue with you. For those who don't know, I'm from New York, and have experiences in South Africa. And I was just thinking about, oftentimes as a frame, what I use with groups is the idea that these are ancient practices, so that there's something already in the life of the participant that may have mindfulness elements that they can hold on to. One of the universal things that I could use is, sunrise and sunset.
Yes.
Many people use that as a time of meditation.
Yes.
And so that we're introducing practices in a context where people may already be unaware of their mindfulness.
Yes, lovely. Yeah.
And to allow people to talk about, even with children, if you tell your child to take a time out,
Sure.
that is a form of mindfulness.
Yeah, that's lovely.
That we have within different, and I often think among people of color, we are diasporic people, we are people who are living all over the world. A lot of times we have, like I said, I sit sometimes in places where prayer is a part of the experience. And so that is not away from
Sure.
practice, but that is a way to be more inclusive, to help people navigate so that they don't feel like they're entering some darkness that is not universal.
Yeah.
And that they're finding new light in familiar places.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah. Thobi, you're going to carry on.
Oh no, I've done. If anybody else I'd finished my point.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. We were going to have questions, weren't we? Simon has come in with a question. Yeah.
And Thobi, I'd very much like to hear your reflections on this just initially, and maybe just more generally in the group. And it feels that the conversation is orientating towards this anyway, which is the Zulu word Ubuntu, or we speak a lot about it, but as far as I understand, it's originally from the Zulu culture. I can't remember. There are three words, which I am because you are, in a sense. So I'm just curious to know how that, because there seems to be a potential bridge in group work, effective group work, effective, contained, present group work as a bridge, or not even as a bridge, as a parallel, almost as a particular iteration of Ubuntu. That they somehow at a feeling level feel like the same thing, but there's of course the culturally unique elements of Ubuntu that, as far as I understand, has its origin in the African contemplative practices through the Zulu tradition. I might have that wrong, but I'm just interested to hear how that has flowed through you from coming as a Black African Zulu speaking woman. And then I think more generally, I'd like to hear, Trish, your thoughts, and Linda, your thoughts as well, around what is this commonality, this point of convergence, or this plane of contact between mindfulness-based groups and perhaps groups in general, healthy groups, healthy group work and Ubuntu. And I think because it has, in response to the question that you're raising, Thobi, a potential, acts as a potential bridge that we might effectively use going forward in teaching mindfulness-based groups in this context.
The word Ubuntu for me, I think needs to be re-understood. I don't think that Ubuntu currently is being used in the sense that it actually is. Umuntu ngabantu is a person because of other people. But Ubuntu it's like it's an inside humanness, you know? It's not even, as a Black woman, Ubuntu Bami was not taught. It was an active thing. It was active. Ubuntu is feeling what that other person is feeling and going, you know what, that's me. And I am going to go and help me, if I can put it that way. But again, I don't want to break it down. I feel that it is a word that is used and abused, and it needs to be re-understood, and it needs to be put back in its place again so that we really understand what we're talking about. When we're saying that mindfulness is supposed to, so when mindfulness starts within me, I go to seek help. That help then will go out into the world. That is an Ubuntu-ness. There's a particle of it that is Ubuntu. That's why I'm interested in, okay, so then how do we then have these conversations, or not conversations, but then how do you hold a group that might act, or how can I, now Trish, my words have left me, but
what I think,
how do we actually humanize? You know, how do we humanize after the 8-week program, after the 2-year Stellenbosch? How do we then show up as humans after the healing itself has happened or is continuing to happen? Sorry, I also ramble on.
No, Thobi, that was just, wasn't that lovely, Linda? Really,
beautiful,
really lovely. You see, I think that
before you, can I just ask Thobi one more little and like additional question which pops up? Trish, you were speaking about embodying versus embodiment. How does this land?
Ubuntu,
what about making it Ubuntu-ing? How do you make it from a concept and a noun into a present participle? How do you make it into something that's immediate and lived, like embodying rather than embodiment? It's just an open question as you were speaking about. Is there a way that it becomes alive and it's taken away out of the abstract into the real?
I would suggest it's by being African. By growing up with it, by having it, by being encultured through it, which is why it's being borrowed in the West and they haven't a clue what it's on about. Not a clue.
It's not taught. And Ubuntu cannot, it's not only just a noun, but then it turns into a verb.
Yeah. And the closest we would get is empathy. Empathy, but it's not the same. It's not. It's an African word that is special to Africa. Elizabeth has come through with her hand up.
Oh, hi, Trish. Lovely to be here. I'm really enjoying the conversation about Ubuntu, and I'm not South African. I'm Ugandan. But it has been part of our culture as well. And I remember from my grandparents and being told that such and such a person has Ubuntu, you know, that this is somebody to emulate. If it was somebody who had shown enormous generosity, kindness, compassion, empathy, and giving without it being material, especially if it is something where an individual has given of their time, has given of their knowledge and experience to help others in the community. Let's put it that way. So it's an innate sort of wisdom. You wouldn't really expect children or teenagers to have that Ubuntu. It's part of it's part of being grown up, in a sense, of fulfilling your potential, that you become more, that you can exhibit the qualities of Ubuntu. And I just want to share, actually, a group that I hold here in the UK. It's Ubuntu Women. And these are about, well, the number varies because it's more of a drop-in center. And I'd like to say that these are not just Black African women, although, of course, that is the idea, in a sense. That's how it started. But it was an open invitation to women of color. So I was very pleased to find that we had, there's a woman from Hong Kong who drops in, there's a woman from who's Lebanese, and so on and so forth. And what we do is that we share our stories. We share how we have overcome particular difficulties. And it's that inner growth that we're trying to share with others, to help them or to show them or to be that strength of Ubuntu that they too can overcome. So it's a kind of community of practice. So as Thobi was saying, that it's not something that's taught, rather something that is shown, something that you can relate to through example and through wishing to be that. It's an aspirational thing as well. So I think I've gone on a bit, sorry. Forgive me. Yeah. I hope that made sense. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, for those words. Jan, did you want to add?
Yes, thank you, Linda. Yes, I would just want to add what I hear from Elizabeth and also echo Thobi. It's my feeling as well. It's not something that we can teach. It's rather the way we arrive as teacher as well. And in our bodies, in our embodying, there's so much energy that we don't have to say anything. It's actually happening in the moment, and that is what mindfulness is to be in the moment, in my body, and it's how I look. It's like how the Eastern people greet each other with namaste. It's I see the divinity in you, and then it's opening up, like the group become, they start flowering because there's this space, this openness, this that things can happen, and sometimes it's a gesture. I was leading a group last week, and when we came back from a mindful walk, and there was time of reflection, just to hold out your hand and say, let's holding this one's story, this one's reflection, and by each one just holding what the other one was saying, it was creating something, a space that we are holding each other. So yeah, so I can feel, Thobi, what you are saying, that's we have this gift of Ubuntu, but it's a gift that we can only live and embody. It's difficult to teach. Yeah, thanks.
Good stuff, eh? That's lovely.
It really is so lovely, and I guess just brings up so much more thinking for me around, you know, the role of mindfulness in reconnecting us with Ubuntu, and if it's already there, you know, can mindfulness ignite it or does it dampen it? So I think we've got so many things to ask in this part of the world, particularly in terms of that bridge and that connection, you know. So yeah,
there's a quote, I think absolutely there's a quote that I use at the end of the book that's from Martin Luther King, which speaks, I think links a little bit with our conversation. It's because it's a little bit like there's this beautiful quality or being called Ubuntu, and how does that relate to mindfulness, and then there's all this social injustice in the world, and you know, what can we do about it, and what has mindfulness got to offer, you know? And he wrote, as long as there is poverty in the world, I can never be rich. As long as diseases are rampant, I can never be totally healthy. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the way our world is made. We are interdependent. And you know, it's taking us a long time to learn that. And my dearest wish is that mindfulness-based groups have something to offer that learning, that interdependent learning. And to be honest with you, I think that you in South Africa and in Africa in general have a head start. You know, in some ways you have a great disadvantage, of course, as well, but in many ways, because of what you've been through and because of the diversity that's actually intrinsic, you know, in your histories. I mean, true in our histories as well, absolutely true in our history. I mean, Elizabeth will probably, could pick me up on that, you know, because it's absolutely true of the UK as well, but it's some sort of hidden in a way that it's not in South Africa. It's kind of looked away. It's ignored or you know, not wanted in a way that in South Africa is much more evident, really. Yeah.
Well, I guess we could say we've got our work cut out for ourselves.
Oh, I know you have. I'm not.
Wherever we are.
I'm not suggesting it's easy. No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No. Yeah.
It's been such a beautiful, rich conversation, Trish, and we're so deeply honored that you chose this group to your book, and we couldn't think of a more special honoring, you know, given the love that we have for you, and you know what you've added to the field. I think is really enormous, and we can't wait to bring in more of it, certainly in terms of the teacher training. So thank you so much for that. Yeah.
And we promised, Linda, do you remember
Yes, exactly. so yeah, Thobi, I don't know if you want to step in there, but we thought we would have Thobi to close our group for us today after all the sharing.
And here comes the nerves. Okay.
So Thobi's got a beautiful offering for us and a sharing with us to close us today.
I would just like to offer just a small meditation. I'll start with finding a comfortable position, finding a comfortable space where you can sit or lie down. There's been a lot of discussion today about groups, and here we are as a group. You've taken time out to be here now. For me, I think that is an indication of progress, that we can be here together like this. This is a representation of Ubuntu coming together with one common cause. And just noticing any thoughts that might be coming through right now, particularly after the discussions that we've had, and how that's landing with you now. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here now. Ukuba khona kwethu la ukubonisa ubuntu. Our presence here in this group together is small evidence of Ubuntu. So take what you will from this time that you've had with us all together and go into the world. Let's change it. Let's engage. Let's talk. Let's befriend. Not just ourselves and our fears and our worries, our happy moments, our joyous moments. All of it. Let's take Ubuntu to the world that so desperately needs it right now. Ngiyanibonga, ngiyabonga, asiqhubekeni. Indlela enhle le esiyihambayo. It's a beautiful path that we are walking. Ngiyabonga. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thobi. Thank you so much, everybody.